Alright, quick news update. About a month ago, Jagex announced some plans for some economy and drop table rebalances. The changes they proposed were mostly aimed at nerfing some of the game's most profitable bosses, with places like Carropac, Glacaur, and Zamorak being hit the hardest. There were a couple buffs proposed at the time as well to offset some of that initial hurt, but they were worded very vaguely at the time, and today we have some more clarity. I'm going to have the news posts linked below, but as they are so lengthy this time around that Jagex actually saw the need to split them into two separate posts, I'm not going to read over the whole thing in this video. I'm just going to go over the highlights, or maybe the lowlights, depending on how you see them. I think the best way to approach this is to go boss by boss. Since there are a lot of individual items listed under each boss, they're basically going over every single common drop. I'm going to break down all of the items that are seeing quantity reductions, and I'm going to try to calculate the overall average decrease for each boss. So starting with Carropac, in normal mode, the average quantity of common loot is going to be receiving about a 37% nerf across the board. The rare drops like the Scriptor of Jas, the Greater Concentrated Blast Codex, and the Carropac's Gauntlets will be receiving an increase by 1%. You'll also be getting slightly more manuscript pages. In hard mode Carropac, the average quantity of common loots is receiving approximately a 26% nerf across the board. However, to offset this, they are increasing the drop rate of the Fasoa and the other rare drops. The Fasoa is going to be receiving an increase of about 13%, so in other words, what was approximately a 1 in 150 to get a Fasoa piece will be going down to about a 1 in 133. And the remaining drops will go from being about a 1 in 192 drop chance down to about a 1 in 181. It's a little bit of a buff for sure, but it doesn't sound like it makes up for the 26% nerf in commons. Next up is the Glacaur. The average quantity of common loot is seeing a roughly 40 to 50% nerf in hard mode, with some drops like Crushed Nests, Baneite, Stone Spirits, and Onyx Dust getting cut down by as much as 75%. Certain drops have also been outright replaced. Spiritweed Seeds will now be Water Runes, and Serenic Scales have been swapped out for 100 Cannonballs. I think the 100 Cannonballs is interesting, and from what I've seen with the rest of the news posts, Serenic Scales is going to be a common thread across the board. They're basically so dirt cheap now that this seems like a desperation play to try and resuscitate some kind of value from them. On the brighter side with Glacaur, the rare drop chance is getting a significant buff, with a 50% increase to the chance of rolling a rare drop, including greater weighting from Enrage. The Frozen Core of Lang specifically is getting a 4% drop rate boost, and the Scripture of Wen and the Lang Artifact are each getting nerfed by 2%. But overall, that's a big buff, especially the fact that Enrage is seemingly for the first time finally going to be taken into account. Next up, let's look at Zamorak, and this was one of the bosses that was completely slashed with the previous update. So here's the summary of what they said today. There is a notable reduction in the average quantity of common loot, with seeds, runes, bolt tips, and salvage all receiving nerfs across the board. For example, Torstal Seeds are being cut in half, blood and soul rune quantities are dropping, and onyx bolt tips are being reduced by over 50%. However, because Zamorak's drop system uses a value weight system, where lower value weight actually means more potential loot, quantity-wise, there are some hidden buffs with this. For instance, Accursed Ashes and Pyroclasts are getting their value weights decreased, meaning that you can now receive more of them per drop. On the other hand, some items like soul runes and small plated salvage are getting their value weight increased, which makes them less common. The uncut onyx has been removed and replaced with uncommon chaos relics, not even the rare ones. They'll be dropping in quantities of 10 to 20, but their value weight is going to be slightly higher than before. The rare version of chaos relics are getting a value weight increase, so you'll be seeing those slightly less frequently as well. As far as the unique drops go, there's some good news at least. The chance to receive a Bow of the Last Guardian piece is being increased by approximately 10% at enrages above 500%. Next boss we'll look at is Zuck, and first off, starting with the minions. The minion loot pool is seeing significant reductions. Onyx bolt tips are being heavily nerfed, where you would previously receive 40 to 60 of them, you'll now be receiving 7 to 18 of those. And large blunt orichalcum salvage has been trimmed to a third of its original range. Serenic scales have been replaced with elderwood spirits, which now drop in smaller amounts, depending on whether they come from the uncommon or the rare table. It's also worth noting that minions that respawn during failed igneous waves will no longer drop loot after the first time, which is a big nerf to the farmability. So rest in peace to any wave 4 farmers who were looking for pages, resonant anima, or supplies on a mid-game Iron Man, for example. As for the Zuck boss himself, Serenic Scales are again being swapped out for Elder Wood Spirits, this time in much larger amounts, about 15 to 25 per drop. Additionally, some of the chance to receive various items on the common table has been shifted towards Elder Wood Spirits, effectively replacing some of the prior common loot pool with them. Sounds like the rare drops are not going to be touched at all at Zuck. So overall, this is just a big nerf to common drops across the board. Raksha. Raksha's loot table is getting a wide-ranging nerf to common drops, particularly the alkables. Salvage quantities have been reduced significantly, with items like small blunt rune salvage dropping from 50 at a time down to as low as 15 at a time, and onyx dust getting cut by more than half. Crystal keys, dinosaur bones, and stone spirits are also all seeing reductions. Several of the seeds have also been swapped out. Spirit weeds for Arbuck, this is a good change, and golden dragon fruit for Siku seeds, both with lowered quantities. The inert adrenaline crystal has also been replaced with the catalytic anima stones for rune crafting. Those will now be dropping in quantities of 40 to 60, with an increased chance to receive them. Serenic scales have been removed altogether from the drop table, and their drop chance has been redistributed across the other items. Notably, the drop rates for Laceration Boots, Blast Diffusion Boots, and Fleeting Boots have been reduced, making them less common. However, this change also makes the 3 ability codexes and the Shadow Spikes more likely to appear. Overall, most of these adjustments are aiming to reduce the value from the high alks coming from the drop table, and they're trying to address some of the oversupply concerns that the broader economy has. Next up is Raziel, who is also seeing a broad reduction in common loot, especially to the high value alkables. Onyx bolt tips and onyx dust are being reduced. The necronium and orichalcum salvages are also going down. They're playing around with some of the seed drops, shifting some of the lower tier seeds up to some higher tier seeds, so maybe some Ironmen will be happy with this. But in my opinion, this one is going to sting overall. Raziel's common drops have never felt all that good in the first place. One bit of good news, Vorcath is receiving some changes that all sound positive. There are no nerfs to the common loot. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Vorcath's rare drops are being made significantly more accessible. In normal mode, the chance to receive the Invoke Lord of Bones Codex is being increased by 17%, and you'll also be seeing a 10% boost to Vorcath spikes across the board. The drop quantity is also going to be increasing from 4 to 6 spikes originally, up to 5 to 7 spikes. In hard mode, the buffs are actually even stronger. The Invoke Lord of Bones Codex and the Vorcath scale drops are both getting a 40% increase in their drop rates. According to the developers, Vorcath didn't require nerfs or any replacements, so the focus here was purely on making the rares more rewarding. This is an exciting change. With how unfun killing Vorcath is already, at least opening the chest is going to feel quite a bit more rewarding. The last bit of content affected is going to be the Wilderness Flash events. There have been a number of nerfs to the common loot quantities from both the sack of wild rewards as well as the sacks of very wild rewards. It's primarily going to be targeting the bulk resources and the alkables. So from the sacks of wild rewards, bloodweed seeds, wyvern bones, infernal ashes, and muddy keys are all being reduced in quantity. Necronium salvage across all sizes is going to be replaced with the orichalcum equivalents, which is a significant nerf in alk value. As far as the sacks of very wild rewards go, magic logs have been hit hard. The drop chance has been reduced and the amount has been reduced nearly by half. Coins are now going to cap at 150,000 rather than 300,000. Some of the items like the huge spiky salvage and the tier 87 weapon drops like the annihilation, the decimation, and the obliteration have been completely removed from the loot pool. Those weapons are returning to their original drop source, which was Wilderness Slayer, so that will be an interesting change. Backcriminal bolts have been replaced with a random rune drop, not like the armor or the salvage, but like the actual magic runes that you use. This will be excluding necromancy runes and time runes. There is also a very rare chance that you'll receive magical thread in this slot as well. And the big news with the very wild sacks is that the dark onyx core is getting a 50% increase to its drop chance, which is a big buff. I think the dark onyx cores have been way too rare for the benefit that they provide to players. So looking at this update as a whole, this is undeniably a wide-reaching nerf to bossing loot. It's definitely clear that Jagex has the goal to rebalance the economy and try to preserve long-term game health, which is definitely a good thing, but I think this is really going to sting in the short term. We've grown used to seeing a lot of these drops in bulk quantities, and them getting scaled back this hard is definitely going to take some time to get used to. That said, there's a small silver lining, especially for Iron Man accounts and collection log hunters. Since the rare drops are being buffed at multiple bosses, it's going to feel a little bit better when you're chasing those uniques or those log slots. I don't know if the buffs are big enough to offset the sting from the common loot nerfs, but this is the news we've received. So there's my attempt at a relatively quick summary of the changes coming in the game soon. If you want to stay on top of RuneScape's news, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you think about these changes. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.